Hello, this is Joseph Holbrook. We're talking today about monotheism and the early roots of monotheism and Zoroastrianism. However, I want to point out that today is Cinco de Mayo. So we want to and here's my cigar for later, we want to greet Mexico and say we're so glad that you won that battle on the 5th of May against the French. Because it gives us an excuse to have some margaritas. Mine are strawberry margaritas, by the way. Okay, so let's jump into it. But first, a little joke. Let's put this up. And God separated the light from the dark. As a bachelor, I go through this process on a regular basis. We're going to be talking about the three great Abrahamic religions that all began in the Middle East among the Semitic peoples. When we say Abrahamic, we mean descended from or taking their inspiration from Abraham. And that would include Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. But less is known about Zoroastrianism, which was also a monotheistic faith, which also began in the Middle East. So we'll talk about some general features of monotheism today, and we'll also talk about, just very briefly, about a few things involved in the history of Zoroastrianism. So the unique features of monotheism partly has to do with the historical period in which it emerged during the Axial Age from about 600 BCE through 200 AC, in the Common Era. I'm sorry, C. I'm not used to the new numbering method. I'm used to BC and AD. I'm trying to adapt. It's hard for an old man. So from about 600 BC through 200 AD was the axial period. Some people would stretch that out to 600 AD, which would include Islam as part of the axial period. We want to talk about the relationship between the monotheistic religions to one another. Their common values that they draw from Abraham, and also the influence of Zoroastrianism, which comes from Persia or Iran, and the influence that it had on the other three religions through Judaism. Monotheism is belief in one all-powerful and personal God, and in no other gods. There are types of monotheism or monism in the Orient, but they often view God as an impersonal force rather than a personal God. Kind of along the lines of may the force be with you. Yesterday was May 4th, so I'm recovering from a lot of may the fourth be with you jokes, and today we have Cinco de Mayo jokes. Judaism and Christianity and Islam are a family of religions tracing back to Abraham and Moses. Other monotheisms include Zoroastrianism, Sikhism, Bhaktic Hinduism, and Amidist Buddhism, and non-dualist Hinduism or Buddhism. You might be surprised to know that there are other monotheistic faiths. Sikhism, my contact with Sikhism is through some really nice guys around Caribbean and 200th Street on US 1 that have that sell liquor, have a liquor store there. That's where I get my Nicaraguan rum, from the Sikhs. So the monotheistic religions emerged when humanity moved beyond cosmic consciousness into historical consciousness. Cosmic religion is basically another word for animism or shamanic religion. And this is the type of religion that predominated with the hunter-gatherers during the Paleolithic Age. It's called cosmic religion or cosmic consciousness because humanity saw the sacred in everything. So in trees, rocks, stones, bears, antelope, rivers, streams, mountains, the sun, the moon, the stars, everything was sacred in the cosmic consciousness. And the sacred was part of all the natural world. Historical consciousness is different, and it presupposes a literate society with some form of writing and some idea of a beginning, a middle, and an end in a linear direction of time as opposed to a cyclical time. Monotheistic religions also trace back to a founder, such as Jesus, Muhammad, Moses, are all Zoroaster. It also has a strong emphasis on the written word and a commitment to a linear concept of time. Monotheistic religions are eschatological. They believe that history is moving towards an endpoint, towards a culmination, a crisis, maybe a judgment. There's also an expectation of an intense individual commitment and an emphasis on verbal expression in monotheistic faiths. They may carry over some symbols or archetypes from cosmic religion, but they place these symbols and myths and archetypes in linear time and history. And as I've already mentioned, the three dominant Abrahamic faiths or monotheistic faiths are Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Today we're going to be talking primarily about Zoroastrianism. And here is a timeline that you cannot see. I'm so sorry, but it's a little too small to read, but it's of the three major Abrahamic religions in their historical development. I've already mentioned the Axial Age from about 600 BC through 200 AD. The interesting thing about the Axial Age that puzzles historians is that similar developments took place in widely separated locations of the world without any seeming contact among them. So, for example, Confucius in China and the Buddha in northeastern India lived almost at the same time. Their lives overlapped. And they both developed an idea of transcendence, of an ethical component to the divinity, and also an idea of the unity of divinity. And at this same time period, you have Zoroaster in Iran. You have Isaiah and Jeremiah, the prophets in ancient Israel, and in all these separate places, widely separated with no contact that we know of, no trade, no contact, no communication. The same ideas emerged within a period of about 100 or 150 years. This is a major thing in history because there doesn't seem to be any causal mechanism. It's possible that it had to do with the development of technology. It may have had to do with the development of empires and governmental structure. But for some reason, human consciousness in about 4 or 5 different locations took a sudden leap forward from a cosmic consciousness to historical consciousness, from polytheism to monotheism or monism, from a capricious and arbitrary form of religion to an ethical form of religion, almost at the same time in history. Some of the common features of monotheism include the belief in one personal God, a linear history, a belief in prophets, and prophets that brought the message of God. They denounced evil and they established an ethical orientation. In each of the monotheistic religions, there was a book of scriptures, the Hebrew Torah, the New Testament, the Quran, the Zend Avesta in Zoroastrianism. There's also a belief in angels and in Satan. To some degree, some of this may have come from the influence of Zoroastrianism. And also an eschatology, which believed in a future divine judgment or a culmination to history. Each of the monotheistic religions that we're talking about over the next couple of weeks originated among Semitic peoples, the ancient Hebrews, Judaism. Also Christianity emerged from Judaism. Islam emerged from the Arabs. Zoroastrianism emerged among the Persians. For the three primary Abrahamic religions, Jerusalem became the most important city. For Islam, it's the third most important. But for Judaism and Christianity, Jerusalem is the primary sacred location or space. Also, the desert is considered to be important in each of the religions. Abraham and Moses, Jesus and Paul retired to the desert. Muhammad received the Quran in the desert. The seventh day of the day of rest as a day of worship and rest is important. And in Judaism and Islam in particular, The importance of a ritual or ethical law, which include dietary guidelines, not quite as much among Christianity. So monotheism's rise became socially important in periods of rapid cultural change. The period in which the ancient Hebrews became monotheistic was one of the most dislocating and disorienting tragic periods of history when they went into captivity. Many people who read the Old Testament might think that the Jews were always monotheistic from the time of Moses' arrival in Egypt. However, there are many scriptures in the Old Testament, from the older parts of the Old Testament, that say that Yahweh is the God above all other gods. And by implication, there are other gods, but Yahweh demands their exclusive allegiance and worship. And there's warnings that they should not worship other gods, such as the Baals or the Asherah. And it's only after the period of the destruction of the temple in the 6th century BC and the experience of being carried off into captivity into Babylon, and other Hebrews being dispersed to Egypt and other parts of the world, that the ancient Hebrews began to meditate on their tragic experience and came to the conclusion that because of their unfaithfulness to God and because of their worship of other gods, they had been judged. And it was after this experience and their return to the Holy Land under the encouragement of Cyrus, the Persian emperor, that they became exclusively monotheistic. Henotheism is a descriptive term for people that believe that there are many gods but only dedicate themselves to the worship of one supreme God. And so it's likely that the ancient Hebrews before the time of the captivity were henotheists, and that they became monotheists through their experience of captivity. Buddhism and Confucianism have some similar patterns that they have followed to the three monotheistic religions. Monotheism has the idea of a universal God who can legitimize one sovereign and one law, and helps greatly in the transition from tribalism to nationhood. And so there's some connection between monotheism and the development of empires and kingdoms. So monotheism is also universalist. It's the idea that there's one God with one message for all people. This obviously leads to some conflict between Christianity and Islam, which are both missionary religions. One might be able to visualize monotheism like a river running through religious history. The obscure springs of monotheism may go back all the way into the Paleolithic era, where there were bands of hunter-gatherers who worshipped the stones and the rocks and the animals, but in most cases, they believed in a primordial high god or sky god that was the creator, but was very remote and inaccessible. The ancient Vedic religion had many gods, but they believed that the creator, the most ancient god and the creator, was Dyaus, D-Y-A-U-S. And you can see how that relates to the word Dios, or Theos, or Zeus. So this river comes from these springs of Judaism, and it's fed by tributaries such as Zoroastrianism and Greek philosophy. It's most likely that the Jews were greatly influenced by the Zoroastrians while they were in captivity in Babylon, and it's also quite possible that the Zoroastrians were influenced by their contact with the Jews. And this becomes then a river of monotheism in the Jewish religion, and eventually it spreads out into three branches of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. So some of this is repeating what we've already said. This is a picture of Zoroaster. Obviously, it's not a picture of him. No one knows what he looked like, but it is an artist's rendition that's quite popular. The time period that's given for his life is 628 BCE to 551, roughly the same time as the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem by the Babylonians and the captivity. However, they're not absolutely sure about the dates of his life. It could have been earlier. Zoroaster was born either in northeast Iran or southwest Afghanistan. And ancient Persian religion before the arrival of Zoroaster was similar to ancient Vedic religion in India before the development of Hinduism or the birth of Gautama Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama. Here's a picture of the Persian Empire at its greatest extent in 540 BC. If you've seen the film 300, where the heroic buff Spartans hold off 100,000 Persians, which is a bit of a historical exaggeration, this is about 100 years before that. And you can see that the Persians had extended all the way over to Sardis and Miletus, biblical names, and they were beginning to threaten the Greeks, which led to conflict between the Greeks and the Persians. Eventually, after several conflicts in which the Persians are defeated, the Macedonians unite Greece under an empire under Alexander, and Alexander invades the Persian Empire and defeats the Persian Empire, eventually going all the way to India. That was around 332 BC. So there's three basic ideas in Zoroastrian religion. One is a battle between light and darkness. Everything is seen in these terms of good and evil, light and dark, and a epic battle between them that will be concluded in the last days. A second idea is eschatology, the idea that history is moving towards a climax or culmination in this fight between light and darkness. The third is the idea of a paradise, or an ideal heavenly realm, which we go to after we are born, after we die and we're judged. We go to paradise or we go to hell. The basic ideas of Persian religion later influenced Judaism, and then through Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Zoroaster believed that there was only one God. He was the creator of all. His name was Ahura Mazda, the Lord of Wisdom. Zoroaster was his prophet. Ahura Mazda revealed himself through the agency of 6 modes or 6 angelic beings. And there was also a type of god of evil, but it was not a god that was equal to Ahura Mazda, not a creator, but it was Ahura Mazda had 2 sons or 2 children, that one was a holy or a good spirit, the other one was an evil spirit or turned to evil. The evil spirit was called Angra Mainyu, or at a later period in history, Arihaman. Ahura Mazda is the god of goodness and morality. Arihaman is the lie. Humans must choose out of their free will which side they're going to be on. Here's a quote from Zoroaster: "We are combatants in a war of ultimate significance and cosmic dimension. No one can be just neutral. In every area of life, day by day, everyone must decide which Lord he or she will side with, the Lord of light or the Lord of the lie." Some Zoroastrian beliefs include that Zoroaster would return one day after his death, born of a virgin. Zoroastrian priests were called Mobeds or Magi. You can see where 3 of them appear in Matthew chapter 2. At the birth of Christ, the 3 Magi were probably Zoroastrian priests. Zoroastrianism's unique contribution is the idea of the end of the world. The souls stay with the body for 3 days after death to meditate on the deeds of life. On the 4th day after death, the soul crosses the Chinvat bridge to either hell or paradise. Time will come to an end, evil will be destroyed, and even the souls in hell will be freed and be brought into paradise, and a new cycle of history will begin. This was a well-established religion by the Persian people by the 6th century BCE. It possibly was the religion of Cyrus the Great, which might explain his friendliness and willingness to support the Jews as they returned to Jerusalem to restore the temple and rebuild the wall. If he was a Zoroastrian, he would have felt that the Jews were very similar, And the Persian Empire was conquered by Alexander the Great in 332 BCE. There was a revival of Zoroastrianism in the 3rd century under the Sassanid rulers of Persia. There are about 15,000 Zoroastrians living in Iran today, but most of them fled to India under Muslim persecution. And there's about 150,000 Parsis living in India today who are modern Zoroastrians. Thank you. That's all for today, and we shall continue next week with Judaism.